Okay, so we shall start our class. Good morning, everyone. So today we are going to continue our class on the chapter 3, and today we are going to study on the KNN nearest neighbor algorithm and K-mean clustering. So to clarify again, everyone hear me clearly? Okay.
Yes, teacher.
Okay, that's fine. So the nearest neighbor classifier are defined by their characteristics of classifying unlabeled examples by assigning them the class of similar labeled example. And so in this state, it means that the nearest neighbor algorithm will classify the new data set, the new data, to the class which has the nearest characteristic to the existing data. So that means it's going to assign the class of the new data based on the distance of the label example. Or we can say that nearest neighbors is a supervised algorithm that classifies data point based on how its neighbor are classified. KNN have been used successfully for example, like computer vision application, including optical characters recognition and facial recognition in both image and video, predicting whether a person will enjoy a movie or music recommendation, identifying pattern in genetic data, perhaps to use them in detecting specific protein or disease. Diseases. In general, nearest neighbors classifier are well suited for classification tasks where relationship among the features and target classes are numerous, complicated and extremely difficult to understand, yet the items of similar class type tend to be fairly homogeneous. So in this case, that means that the nearest neighbor classifier are well suited for the classification task. But the relationship among the features, it might not be involved because the algorithm itself is just depend on the the distance which the old example or the trained data is set when the new data is coming. So here is the strength and the weakness of the KNN algorithm. So the strength is it is simple and effective, that we are easy to understand and to implement the algorithm. Make no assumption about the underlying data or distribution. Fast training pace, which means that the training is not complicated. And for the weakness, the KNN does not produce a model, which means that we don't build a model in the KNN algorithm, and limiting the ability to understand how the features are related to the class. So as stated previously, since the algorithm depending on the distance, so the feature might not related to the class, and the KNN algorithm uh, might not able to understand the features which feature could be affects to the class. Require selection of an appropriate K. So before we apply the KNN algorithm, we have to determine the K. And on how to determine the K, there are some many ways based on the actual problem, or maybe based on the author with their reason to choose case, and also nominal features and missing data require additional processing. In this case, it means that the, the, the weakness on the feature missing, that means the KNN will require more data processing. So that is the weakness point of the KNN. Export. Step in KNN. To apply the KNN, the first step you have to choose K, which K is a variable term, implying that any numbers of nearest neighbor could be used. And after you choose the K, the algorithm requires a training dataset made up of examples. Example here refer to the dataset that have been classified into several categories as labeled by a nominal variable. So you have to have like a trained dataset and a test dataset. In trained dataset, you have to have the label for your example. Okay. For each unlabeled record, there's a step. In the test dataset, can identify K record in the training data that are the nearest in similarity. And then the unlabeled test instance is assigned the class of the majority of the K nearest neighbor. So in this part, it means that when you have the trained data and you have the label of your trained data, and when the testing data is coming, and then based on the nearest similarity or the distance, and it's gonna vote which one are gonna be the nearest, and then the algorithm will assign the new data to the class that has the nearest neighbor. So for example now, suppose that prior eating the mastery's meal, then we had created a dataset in which we recorded our impression of a numbers of ingredients we tested previously. So in this case, we want to try to create a dataset from eating a meal, and we identify some ingredient based on what we test. So to keep things simple, we rated only 2 features of each ingredient. The first is a measure from 1 to 10 of how crunchy the ingredient is. The second one is a 1 to 10 score of how sweet the ingredient tastes. We then label each ingredient as one of the 3 types of food, which is fruit, vegetable, protein. Okay, so here our data set that we created. So let's see, this is this is the ingredient. We have an apple, bacon, banana, carrot, celery, and cheese. So we assign that the apple will have the sweetness 10, the crunchiness 9, and the food type, it could be fruit. The bacon 1 and the crunchiness 4, and it is in the type of protein, and so on. Like here, this is the sweetness and the crunchiness, and this is the label of the class, vegetable and protein. So from the example, we can plot the data into a 2-dimension features, 2-dimension space, sorry. And we can see that, and here if we add more some ingredient, for example, like pear, crab, orange, and banana, fish, or lettuce, etc. So if we have those data and if we plot it in two-dimensional space, we're gonna see this kind of data like this, based on the data we have. Just example. And then based on the food type we have, we can cover this way, that we have 3 classes for our data. So these vegetable, these ingredients are vegetable, these ingredients are fruit, these ingredients are protein. So suppose that after constructing this dataset, we decide to use it to answer is tomato a fruit or vegetable. So right now we have already had our dataset which are 3 classes. vegetable, protein and fruit. And this is the new data coming. So right now, what we have to do is to decide whether tomato is in the class of fruit or in the class of vegetable or in the class of protein. Okay. So locating the tomato nearest neighbor require a distance function. So we will use the distance function, a formula that measures the similarity between the two distances. There are many different ways to calculate distance. Traditionally, the KNN algorithm will use the Euclidean distance. So this is the formula of the Euclidean distance in the n-dimensional space. Okay. So just example, if just for example, to calculate the distance between the tomato, so we give that tomato sweetness is equal 6. Sorry, no, not we give. We give tomato equals 6, sweetness equals 6, crunchiness equals 4, and then we give the green bean, should be green bean, sweetness equals 3 and crunchiness equals 7. So right now we're gonna have the distance tomato here gonna be 4.2. So what does mean by here? So where is the green bean? Here, the green bean. So from our eye, we could see that the green bean might be far, or it's not, it's the nearest neighbor. However, we just calculate only 1K. It means that if you choose only 1K, the tomato is automatically assigned to the class where it belongs to, where the K belong to, the class of the K we selected belong to, right? Because we choose only one case. Do you get what I mean? Because from here we calculate only the distance from tomato to the green bean. So if we select only 1K here, which means that tomato will assign to the vegetable. However, if we calculate the distance between tomato to the crab, to the nut, to the orange, and to the fish, and then we vote that which distance is going to be the nearest, and then we assign our new dataset to the class of that nearest neighbor. So in this case, it might be fruit, right? To the orange. So this is how the KNN algorithm process. So to classify the tomato as a vegetable, protein, or fruit, then we will begin by assigning the tomato to the food type of a single nearest neighbor, and this is called one KNN classification. So that I have mentioned that if you choose only the green bean, that we calculate only the one distance. So basically, it's gonna assign the tomato to the class of that K that we select. So in this case, we call one KNN classification. The orange is the nearest neighbor, or sorry, the orange is the nearest neighbor to the tomatoes, as the orange is a fruit. The one KNN algorithm would classify tomato as fruit. If you use KNN algorithm with K equal 3 instead, then it performs a vote among the 3 nearest neighbor, orange, grape, and nut. Since the majority class among these neighbor is fruit, 2 of 3 vote, then the tomato again is classified as fruit. Okay. Choose an appropriate case. So the decision of how many neighbors to use for KNN determine how well the model will generalize to the future data. So if you choose the small k, it's gonna be the bias, and if you choose big K, it's gonna take too long to process. Another alternative way, you can apply square root of n. N is the numbers of all dataset in the dataset, or the number of all data in the dataset, But in this scenario, it might not. Sorry, in this alternative way, it's not always result in the single base K. It means that sometimes it might give you the best accuracy when you choose the K based on the square root. However, another way is to choose a few random K value and test it. Then select the K that give the most accuracy rate and less error rate. So which means that you choose multiple K and you try to train and test it. If there is a high accuracy, on which K, so that K could be the possible K that could lead your algorithm to have a higher accuracy. It suggested to choose odd number. So in another research, this says that odd number could possibly more. I mean, it frequently more possible to get the higher accuracy in your algorithm for the KNN. And another step, another alternative way is the weighted voting process. This weighted voting process gonna give you the voter a weight, and then uh, you might give the nearest neighbor that it would be having a high weight than the other neighbors, which are not near to the new data set. So if you want to know more on how to use weighted voting process, you can check it. Okay. However, these are only how you choose the K to apply the KNN algorithm. Okay. So until now, anyone having question about the KNN algorithm? Because this is just only the example to the KNN algorithm. And after the KNN, we're going to have the K-mean clustering algorithm. Okay. Anyone having question? Hello. គ្នាទាំងអស់គ្នាតន់ខ្ញុំនិយាយដែរទាំងអស់គ្នា Hello. Hello គ្នាយើង
Sir, I have a question, but I'm not sure about my question.
Okay.
So my question is, the more K you get, the better you will be accurate.
You means that if you choose the big K, like more K,
Yes.
and it will give you the better accuracy.
Is it always is it always better accuracy with big K, or can have sometimes lack of accuracy?
So it is depend. I mean, it depend on the actual data you have, and but the actual process is that if you have many Ks, so our process is like the iterative process. So if you have big K, you will spend the processing time on the computation, right? So this is just the calculation on the KNN. And another way is that it might be the underlying data sometimes, because the small K is like you said, it is biased. Bias is like if you choose one, for example, it might always go into uh, the class that the data belong to the data that the class that data belong to, right? However, if you choose like the appropriate K, the algorithm would be better on in terms of the process, the computation, and also the accuracy or the error rate. So I would like to say that it is depend, but it is not always that the big K give you the higher accuracy, right? For example,
Okay.
if you had like 10 data point, if you choose K equal 10, so which means that you're gonna calculate the new data set to every data point, right? And you're gonna compare and assign to the class uh, where which data is the nearest, right? So sometimes it's not necessary to calculate the distance between the K, between the new data set to every data point, right? Just find the nearest in the class, and then you can calculate it. But it's a little bit difficult to define that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I would like to continue to another algorithm, which is the K-mean clustering. So the K-mean clustering is also a classification algorithm, but the different thing is that the K-mean is the unsupervised algorithm, which we had the data point on the space, and then we don't know which data having the label or what class of those data. So the class K-mean clustering will divide those data or categorize those data into the cluster. So clustering is the process to analyze and group data objects based on only on the information found in the data, which describe the object and the relation. This is how the clustering process. And there are two types of clustering, which are the partitional clustering and hierarchy, right? Hierarchy clustering. So here the partitional clustering, and here is the hierarchy clustering. So what is K-mean? So K-mean is a partitional clustering approach. As I mentioned, it is a unsupervised machine learning algorithm to do the classification task. Each cluster is associated with a centroid. So centroid here refers to the center point. For example, here you will have the data point here, and you compute the central point between those data points. So this is called the centroid. Also here we can call it the centroid. Determination centroid by using Euclidean method for distance calculation. So in this K-mean, also using the Euclidean method. Each point is assigned to the cluster with sorry, there are some noise, please. Moment, please. Okay, so let's continue. I'm sorry. So here, each point is assigned to the cluster with the closest centroid, the minimum distance. So it is like it's like comparing other boarding process like the KNN. The numbers of cluster K must be specified. So in K-mean here also required to specify the K in advance. So next, how's K-mean applied? So firstly, you have to initial the centroid, and to initial the centroid, often do by, to select the centroid, mostly we just random and select it. And the second step is cluster produce vary from one run to another. It means that it's just like when you select the select the centroid, just make sure it is different from others. And the centroid is the mean of the point in the cluster. So as I have shown you previously, the centroid is the mean of the data point in the class. And the closeness, in this class we're gonna use the Euclidean distance, and there are also other methods like cosine similarity or correlation. However, it's based on the data you have to which method you apply to calculate the distance. And each point is assigned to the cluster with the closest centroid, the minimum distance, and then the K-mean will converge for common similarity measure. So from this part, you can see that the input is going to be the numbers of cluster, and then we calculate the centroid, we calculate the distance, we vote or group the data point into the cluster, and then we compare if the cluster are converged. If not, our iteration will continue to continue until the group of class are converged. So here, how to choose an appropriate K. So it is quite similar or might be a little bit different from the KNN. You can use another clustering method like EM algorithm, we call expectation maximization algorithm, to apply to find K. And also maybe you run algorithm on data with several different values of K, as like the KNN. You choose like few K, and then you try to test with the K value here. If the accuracy, if the accuracy is high, we might say that K would be the best K for this task or this learning task. Use the prior knowledge about the characteristic of the problem. So if you have specific problem, you may try to understand the characteristic of the data, or maybe the problem, the whole data, and then you can predict which case should be applied. And another question is how to initial the center. So to initial the center, you can random point in feature space, just randoms like it, random point from dataset, or look for the dense regions of the space. Spread them uniformly around the feature space. So maybe you can make them uniformly around the space. So you can select the initial center or the initial centroid. So here, this is also the Euclidean distance calculation, and this is the centroid, how you calculate the centers of the n-dimensional data point. And this is just an example of how you calculate the central point on the 2D point on the 3 data point. Okay, so here, the example. So after we finish the class, after we finish this algorithm, I have an algorithm to practice for you guys to do it, and I will check on everyone. So here, suppose that here, this is our data point. For example, we have the point A until point F, and this is the x-axis and y-axis. And we suppose that we're going to apply the K-mean clustering for the following data set with K equal 2, which means that we have 2 clusters. So I want to remind you back that this data point, we don't have the label. So why we don't have the label? Because this is the unsupervised learning. So the supervised learning will have the class. For example, when you see our data set on the food, right? We have apple, we have banana, something like that, and we have the crunchiness, we have the sweetness. and then we also classify those parts to the fruit or to the vegetable. But here we have data point here, but we don't have the label. So that is why this is the unsupervised. Okay, so if we plot it into the graph, we're gonna see our data point like this. Okay, so let apply the K-mean algorithm. Okay, so to apply, we randomly select the initial mean of cluster K as x sub 1, x bar sub 1 power 0 equal to the point A, and x bar sub 2 power 0 equal to C, the point C here. Then compute the, sorry, this one would be compute the distance of each data point to each mean cluster. So here is the mean cluster of each class. So it means that x sub 1, x bar sub 1 power 0 is the mean cluster of cluster 1. Okay, and x bar sub 2 power 0 is the mean cluster of cluster 2. So right now we're going to calculate the distance between the point A to the cluster 1 and calculate the distance A to the cluster 2, the mean of cluster 2. So these are the results of the distance based on the Euclidean formula. And when we calculate this part already, we have to compare. So A for the cluster 1, the mean of the cluster 1 is 0. So which means that A itself is the mean of the cluster. So we assign A to the cluster 1. Okay. B, we have the cluster 2, the mean cluster 2, the distance between B and mean cluster 2 is smaller than the mean from B to the mean cluster 1. So we assign B into the cluster 2. Okay. And so on, we have this cluster. And these are our data point. Okay. And then we have to recompute our mean cluster, which means the next iteration. Here, the x bar sub 1 power 1. So this is the first iteration. No, this is the first iteration, and this is the second iteration. And we compute the mean based on the data point in the class. So the class 1 will have the data point A, D, E, F. So we have to compute the mean cluster based on this data point in the class 1. So we got a new cluster X here and Y here. And also the same as mean of the cluster 2. So here we have B and C in the cluster, and we compute the mean of the cluster 2 again for the second iteration, and then we got a new update of the centroid. Okay, here is our cluster. Next. Oh, sorry, here. Yeah, here. So from the same thing, just an iteration, you calculate again the distance from A to the mean cluster 1 for the second iteration, and the distance between point A to the cluster mean cluster 2 of the second iteration, the last updated, and then we can have the distance here, and then we compare it again. See? So the result we got is here. Cluster 1 we have A, B, A, D, E, F, and cluster 2 we have B and C. So in this case, based on the previous result and the current result are the same, which means that there is no difference between the cluster from the first iteration and the second iteration. So our K-mean algorithm will terminate here, that we will stop from here. And the result of our classification is that the cluster 1 will have data point A, D, E, F, and the cluster 2 will have B and C. Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
can I ask a question?
Yes. Yeah.
So what would have happened if we at the first step we chose like for the for the main cluster, like for example C, and for
Yes.
the second cluster like B. So basically, if we make a mistake about choosing the initial main cluster, what would have happened?
Um, the 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 thing is that you might have more iterative to find the conversion of your cluster, right? So here, if you choose C and D as the main cluster, I think you will have more iterative process. It's not the end, right? This is, if you don't believe me, when we finish this one, we can try that. It
Okay.
might be more. It will try loop or do more iterative process until you have the final cluster, which means that the last iterative cluster result will the same as the n minus one, or maybe the last minus one process, and then you will got might be the same. I think it should be the same. You know why? Because from your data point, you can see it clearly is that B and C would be here, right? Might be here. And these four are near together. So based on the distance, basically you can see that we will have only two clusters. It might be two cluster is the best, that this data point will separately cluster into two classes, and these two are together and these four are together.
Um, so that I well understood, but what would okay, for example, if we had lot of points and we struggle to determine how many cluster we have, I mean, even
So
though, yeah,
I can understand that. That is why on where we said how to choose case, we can try another algorithm, maybe to study on the data and try to predict k to get k, or maybe you can try several k, right? For example, if normally, as I mentioned, when we have data set, you have to explore your data to see, right? So we can plot it on the graph to see how the nature of your data. And if you see something like, I don't put it here, some dancing area data point here, dancing data point area here, some dancing means the data is moved together, moved to some to a point together, near together. Dancing here, like like 4 or 5 classes from your visualization. So you can predict that k equal 5 might be the best. So you can try k equal 5, or you might try k equal to 7 or 6, something like that, based on your nature of the data, right? So this is the pre-understand of the data, and then you can have the knowledge of data, you can get k. But if you don't know anything and it's like the data is too big, however, any data you can visualize it, I think, only the data with the high dimensional. For example, like you have X, Y, Z, or maybe you have 4-dimensional or 6-dimensional. So that is hard to visualize. So in this case, it might be hard to choose the K, right? So back to here, in order to choose K, it is more sensitive if you choose wrong K. But however, you can try to understand your data nature first, and then we can think that maybe which K would be better, and you can try few Ks and see the result. And then you can select one K that would be the best for your problem. Okay? Do you get my idea?
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Lúc cũng giống trong lại lúc cũng chưa vô cái lại cluster one á hãy bạn dân vô A D E F ចឹងលោក
D, yeah, okay. នេះមែន អូខេ កន្លែងនេះចាដំបូងយើងមិនរើសយក initial min cluster មួយអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងដោយសារយើងប្រើ case មក2យើងត្រូវរើស2រើស min cluster ពី random point ចុះថាយើង random យកចំណុចណាមួយទៅដល់ពេលខ្ញុំ random ចាប់បាន A ហើយចាប់បាន C អូខេដូច seller គាត់សួរមកអញ្ចឹងកាលណាយើងរើសបើសិនយើងរើស data point នឹងអត់សូវត្រូវវាមានបញ្ហាកើតឡើងបញ្ហាគឺយើង loop ច្រើនដងមានថាធ្វើច្រើនដងទម្រាំតែដល់យើងបានខ្លះនេះគឺ conversion ហើយដល់ពេលសំណួរគ្នាសួរថាតើធ្វើម៉េចមិនដឹងថា cluster 1ស្មើប៉ុណ្ណឹងគឺយើង compare distance នេះតោះណាអញ្ចឹងពី min របស់វាគឺ distance ស្មើ0ទៅបាទអញ្ចឹងគឺស្មើ0មានថាវាខ្លីជាងគេតើអត់បើវាខ្លីជាងគេមានថាយើងអាសាវាចូល class 1ដោយសារតែ min នេះគឺជា min នេះគឺជា min class របស់1 class 1តើអត់sorry នឹងគឺជា min cluster របស់1អញ្ចឹងយើងអាសាចូលហើយដូចគ្នាដែរបើសិនជា B ដោយសារតែ distance នេះតូចជាងតើអត់ហើយនេះគឺជា min class ទី2អញ្ចឹងវាអាសាវាទៅ class ទី2ខ្ញុំសូមលើកលេខទូរស័ព្ទតិចsorry so អញ្ចឹងគ្នាយើងយល់នៅឡើយមិញតើអត់
បាទអូខេចឹងលោកគ្រូខ្ញុំសូមមើលអញ្ចឹងយើងឧទាហរណ៍លោកគ្រូយក A និង C ចុះយើងមើលមិនយើងអាចសន្មតថាយើងយក A និង C ហ្នឹងវាធ្វើឲ្យយើង loop វាតិចតែថាយើងអត់ធ្វើច្រើនអាហ្នឹងយើងអាចមានវិធីមើលអត់
អូខេតាមពិតទៅដោយសារ data point នេះតិចតោះណាខ្ញុំអូខេ wait ខ្ញុំសាកស៊ីខ្ញុំចង់បញ្ជាក់ថាមានន័យថាដំបូងគឺយើងអត់វិធីសាស្ត្រវាគឺវាមានគេឲ្យយើងប្រើ EM algorithm មួយទៀតដែល EM ហ្នឹងគឺយើងត្រូវតែមើល process របស់វាសិនតោះណាពេលខ្លះគេអាចប្រើ EM ដើម្បីទៅរក K ប៉ុន្តែវាដូចជាពីបេតុងអញ្ចឹងបើសិនជាពេលខ្លះគឺគេសុខចិត្តយើង run data ហ្នឹង random K យើង random ស្អែមកថាឥឡូវឃើញ data point យើងតិចហ្នឹងវាប្រហែលជាមួយខ្លះ2ខ្លះទេតើឬក៏3ខ្លះ at most ហើយអូខេអញ្ចឹងពេលហ្នឹងគឺយើងសាកយកវាមកតេស្តម្ដង2ដងយើង save program យើងមិនស្គួយកណនីដៃអញ្ចឹងឯងប៉ុន្តែនេះដោយសារយើងចង់ឲ្យ understand គឺយើងកណនីដៃអញ្ចឹងពេលហ្នឹងគឺយើង run ទៅបើសិនជា result របស់យើងមួយណាដែលវា better គឺយើងទៅ save នៅក្នុងនោះមកគឺយើង training data set មែន testing data set មែនហើយយើងធ្វើប្រមាណ epoch sorry យើងធ្វើប្រមាណk ទី1ស្មើប្រមាណ k ទី2ស្មើប្រមាណ k ទី3ស្មើហើយ result មួយមាន effectivity ខ្លះតោះណាជួនកាលខ្ញុំអាចនិយាយជាទៀតជួនកាលពេលខ្លះយើងឈូ K មិនប្រកាសថាតតែ 100% ឬក៏95 accuracy ឯងប៉ុន្តែយើងមើល learning time របស់យើងឧទាហរណ៍ថាគេចង់ឲ្យវាហ្នឹង apply លើ x គេមួយរអីមួយចឹងទៅឧទាហរណ៍ដល់ពេល algo របស់យើងហ្នឹងវាធ្វើមកបានតែ 88% ឧទាហរណ៍សំខាន់88ហ្នឹងយើងប្រឹងព្យាយាមរក K ហើយរត់បានទេប៉ុន្តែនេះខ្ញុំគិតថាលើ KNN មួយណានៅលើ K-Mean មួយអញ្ចឹងពេលហ្នឹងនៅពេលហ្នឹងយើងទៅសិក្សាជាវិញសិក្សាថាតើ error rate ប៉ុណ្ណឹងថាតើវាអាច apply ជាមួយនឹង actual time យើងបានអត់បើ apply បាន K ហ្នឹងខ្លាចទៅជា best របស់យើងឯងតោះណាប៉ុន្តែដោយសារតែ algorithm វាមិនមែនមានតែ K-Mean ទេវាអាចមាន algorithm ផ្សេងទៀតអញ្ចឹងមកហើយបានយើងសិក្សាថា algo មួយនេះ apply លើ method apply នៅលើ problem មួយនេះទោះបី K ប៉ុន្មានក៏ដោយវាបាន result ទៅប៉ុណ្ណឹងអញ្ចឹងនោះវាជា limitation របស់វាហើយយើងអាចធ្វើមិនទេមានតែរក algo មួយទៀតតោះមានប៉ុន្តែទន្ទឹមនឹងហ្នឹងយើងត្រូវមាន method ដើម្បី improve ថា K នេះប៉ុណ្នេះវាបានប៉ុណ្ណេះ K នេះប៉ុណ្នេះបានប៉ុណ្ណេះប៉ុន្តែបើយើងចង់ប្រើ algorithm K-Mean ហ្នឹងគឺយើងសួរខ្លួនឯងជាក់ស្ដែងជាមួយនឹង actual របស់យើង actual គឺម៉េចថាតើ objective ដែលយើងធ្វើ algorithm ហ្នឹងសួរថាតើ result ប៉ុណ្ណឹងវាអាច fit ជាមួយនឹងការងារជាក់ស្ដែងបើវា fit គឺយើង apply K ប៉ុណ្ណឹងតោះណាតែបើសិនជាវាគិតថាអូ error ប៉ុណ្ណឹងគឺធំអត់អាចប៉ះអត់អាចប្រើការទេអញ្ចឹងយើងអត់ត្រូវប្រើហ្នឹងរក method ថ្មីអូខេហើយត្រឡប់មកវិញដើម្បីមើល K ហ្នឹងគឺខ្ញុំឧទាហរណ៍ដូចនេះអញ្ចឹង នេះ data point យើងមានប៉ុណ្ណឹងបើសិនខ្ញុំមើលទៅខ្ញុំអាចនិយាយថា K ខ្ញុំអត់ដឹងថា K ខ្ញុំគិតថាប្រហែលជា2 ទៅ 3 ខ្លះដោយសារអានេះមួយខ្លះអានេះប្រហែលជាមួយខ្លះទៀតហើយអានេះមួយតែឯងបើសិនខ្ញុំគិតអញ្ចឹងបើខ្លះខ្ញុំគិតវាអាច2 ទៅ 3 ខ្លះនេះដោយសារតែ data point យើងមើលចង់អីចឹងណាអូខេហើយបើសិនជាយើងមាន data point ច្រើនពេលខ្លះវាក៏នៅម្ដុំគ្នាទៀតដែរបើសិនវាកាន់តែច្រើនវាថាវា dancing មានថាវាទៅញឹកជាប់គ្នាញឹកចិត្តគ្នាអញ្ចឹងអាណានៅញឹកចិត្តគ្នាយើងគិតថានឹងម្ដុំមួយខ្លះណាចិត្តគ្នាទៀតយើងដាក់វាមួយខ្លះទៀតបងណាអូខេពេលនេះគឺយើងអាចឈូស K ច្បាស់ Okay, so come back. Here's some limitation of the K-mean algorithm. Every data point is assigned uniquely to one and only one cluster. A point may be equidistant from two cluster center, and a probabilistic approach will have a soft assignment of data point reflecting the level of uncertainty. So if there is some uncertainty of the data, it might be difficult for the K-mean algorithm. The K-mean have problem when the data contain outliers. So as I have explained, if the data is outlier, it will affect the mean value. And in this case, K-mean is depend on the distance on the mean. So if there is an outlier data, our K-mean algorithm might be not accurate enough to apply on the learning task, or maybe you have to clean the data first before applying the K-mean. Numbers of cluster K is chose manually, so that means the weak point is that we have to choose K, and it's quite difficult to find the K value as everyone asking. And clustering data of varying size and density, yeah. So it based on the size and the density. The size refers to the dimensional of the data. So if we have only 2-dimensional, it might be easy for us to visualize the data and predict the K value. But if it's more, it's gonna be difficult. It here scaling with the numbers of dimension, just like that. Okay, the density, the size, and the dimension. So our class today, we have discussed about classification using KNN and K-mean clustering. For KNN, unlike many classification algorithms, KNN does not do any learning. Then it simply store the training data verbatim. Okay, unlabeled test example are then matched to the most similar record in the training set using a distance function. The unlabeled example is assigned the label of its neighbor. So this part is just like I have mentioned that the KNN will assign the new class to our new data, assign the class to our new data based on the neighbor data or the similarity. In spite of the fact that the KNN is very simple algorithm, but it is capable of tracking extremely tasks. So, such as like identification of cancerous masses. So that means it is simple for the KNN. However, it can apply for the big task for the identification of the cancer. For the K-mean, it is unsupervised algorithm, which is relatively simple to implement, just like KNN, and scale to large dataset and generalize to cluster different shape and size. Okay, so from now, our class for the algorithm K-mean and KNN is finished, and I have one example for you to do on the K-mean, just the practice one. So everyone will join that, and we will see together if we have if we can solve the problem. But actually, it is simple one. Normally I put it as quiz, but I think today just an example. Yeah.
ខ្ញុំមានសំណួរមួយខ្ញុំចង់សួរតកតងជាមួយ cluster មិនតិចទៀត
សួរមក
លោកគ្រូសូមជួយទៅ slide cluster បន្តិចបានកន្លែងទៅហ្នឹងលោកគ្រូហ្នឹងហើយលោកគ្រូមិនបានយើងអាចដឹងថាយក x អង4ហើយ x ដើយកតែ2អញ្ចឹងមិនបានយើងមិនបែងចែកវា3ស្មើហ្មងទៅ
x អង4កន្លែងណាចេះ
កន្លែង x1 ហើយនឹង x2 ចែកហ្នឹងមិនបានយើង data យើងមាន6មិនបានយើងមិនចែកវា3ស្មើហ្មងទៅ
អូខេ so ឥឡូវយើងមើលនេះជា result នៃ cluster x ទី1ដល់នេះអានេះយើងសន្មតថាវាជា mean cluster ដំបូងដល់តែដល់ពេល based on the algorithm យើងនិង distance calculation ហើយយើង compare វាទៅយើង vote ថា A នៅក្នុង class ទី1អញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំចង់គណនា centroid ដែលនៅក្នុង class ទី1ចុះនេះអញ្ចឹង class ទី1ខ្ញុំមាន data point តែ5 14ហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំមិនត្រូវគណនាយកទៅ4មកគណនាហើយដោយសារតែ cluster ទី2ខ្ញុំមាន data point តែ2ហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំត្រូវតែយក data point មកគណនា mean របស់ខ្ញុំចង់រក centroid វិញខ្ញុំត្រូវគណនាតែ2 data point ហ្នឹងដល់អញ្ចឹងមានថា x on 0និង x 0នេះវាគឺជា centroid នៃ cluster ហើយថាខ្ញុំសន្មតថា A ហ្នឹងដើរតួជា centroid ហ្មងតោះនិយាយជា centroid នៃ cluster ទី1ហើយ C គឺជា centroid នៃ cluster ទី2បន្ទាប់ពី first iteration យើងអាចបាន update cluster របស់យើងដឹងថា data point ណានៅក្នុង cluster ទី1 data point ណានៅក្នុង cluster ទី2អញ្ចឹងពេលនេះយើង update centroid របស់យើងជាង centroid ទី1យើង initial ដូចយើង initial x0 ស្មើណាបន្ទាប់មកទៀត x0 យើង update ទៅ x on ណាអញ្ចឹង x0 របស់ខ្ញុំ update ទៅ x on ដែល x on របស់ខ្ញុំដឹងតែ data point មាន4អញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំគណនាតែ mean cluster 4តន់បាទ Okay, តាមពិតនេះគឺជា quiz ទី1 so this is my first quiz but however I don't count the sorry let me check it I have to delete this one this is my last year quiz however today I am not counted as scoring so I want you to apply our K-Mean algorithm on the problem number 3 okay so let's everyone try it and I will give you like 30 minutes or maybe 20 minutes. You have to do this, apply the K-Mean clustering on this problem, and then let's check together if anyone can solve this problem. Okay. So spend about 20 to 30 minutes on this problem because there might be a lot of calculation, I think. Consider the following data set consisting of the score of 2 subjects on each of 7 individual students. So here, math and physics. This data set okay. Everyone still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So let's try to apply the K-Mean algorithm on this problem. Let's define big one. Okay, just forget about this too. Clear. Okay. So after 20 minutes or maybe 10 minutes, if anyone can finish, just tell me and we will see together. Okay. Chẳng khiយើងទាំងអស់គ្នាអនុវត្តលំហាត់នេះទាំងអស់គ្នាមកវិញហើយជាក់ស្ដែងមានយើងពេលប្រឡងគឺ require calculation ហើយចឹងទៅពួកយើងត្រូវតែ practice បើសិនជាអត់ practice ទេប្រហែលជាពិបាកគាត់ណាហើយនេះទើបតែ first two algorithm ហើយ algorithm នេះគឺស្រួលៗទេហើយនៅ algorithm ផ្សេងៗទៀតអូខេ ឥឡូវពួកយើងមិនដែរមានបញ្ហាអត់ដល់ឡើយ
ហើយយល់
សូយល់
ដឹងត្រូវដើមពីណាមុនហើយតែមកលោកគ្រូខ្ញុំចង់សួរកន្លែងបកទៅមួយរៀនទីលោកគ្រូកន្លែង x min នៃ x1 នៃ class 0នៃ class 1ណាហ្នឹងយើងធ្វើឲ្យបានយើងដឹងថាវាស្មើតម្លៃ0អញ្ចឹងលោកគ្រូហើយ 22.93 អីអាហ្នឹងយើងកំភាំងមួយណាគេលោកគ្រូ
អូខេចាំមានថាយើងអត់ធ្វើ follow ពីលើបាទមានថាឥឡូវយើងមាន data set ដូចគ្នាចឹងឃើញអត់យើងសម័យមើលនេះ data set ដូចគ្នាហើយដើម្បីធ្វើនឹងបានខ្ញុំយល់ដើម្បី apply ទីមួយយើងត្រូវ initial centroid ពីតែ centroid សំដៅទៅអី centroid គឺសំដៅទៅលើនេះបងណាមានថាយើងមាន data point ប្រមាណដែលជា cluster ទី1នោះគឺ centroid របស់វានេះគឺជា centroid របស់ data point នេះតោះណាប៉ុន្តែសំណួរសួរថាពេលដែលយើងចូលមកពឹប data យើងមានរបៀបចេះនេះ data student មានអញ្ចឹងសួរថាមួយណាជា centroid អត់ដឹងទេតើយ៉ាអញ្ចឹងmình phải ថាដំបូងគឺយើង initial centroid ហើយសួរ initial ដល់មិនគឺ randomly select អញ្ចឹងក្នុង data point ហ្នឹងយើងត្រូវ random select ថាតើdata point មានណាវាជា centroid យើង suppose ហ្នឹងមានថាយើង give x0 ស្មើនឹងយើង start x0 យើងគ្រាន់តែដូចមិត្តភ័ក្ដិយើងសួរអញ្ចឹងបើយើង start x0 ណាមួយដែលវាខុសវាធ្វើឲ្យយើងនឹង loop ច្រើនដងតែបើយើងចេះមើលទៅ data នឹងត្រូវយើងយកទៅគឺ loop algorithm នឹង loop ទៅ2ដងឯទេដូចខ្ញុំ loop ឲ្យយើងមើលនៅក្នុងនេះអញ្ចឹងដោយសារតែខ្ញុំគិតថាខ្ញុំយក data point A នេះខ្ញុំយក A គឺជា initial cluster initial min cluster min ហ្នឹងគឺជា central point ហើយ min cluster របស់ class ទី1ហើយដោយសារតែ algorithm របស់យើងហ្នឹងគឺគេប្រាប់ថាដោយសារតែបញ្ហារបស់យើងគេឲ្យ class 2តើគេថា class 2មានថាយើងមាន central point centroid ទៅ2តើសម្រាប់ class មួយអញ្ចឹងសមាថានេះគឺជា centroid នៃ class ទី1អានេះគឺជា centroid នៃ class ទី2ហើយខ្ញុំ select វាស្មើ C គឺខ្ញុំ random បើ random ខ្ញុំចាក់មួយណាក៏បានបើខ្ញុំអត់មើលប៉ុន្តែដោយសារខ្ញុំមើល data ខ្ញុំគិតថាគួរតែ C ល្អហើយគួរតែ A ល្អតោះមានអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំបានតម្លៃ x0 x on 0និង x 2 0បងណាហើយទន្ទឹមនឹងកន្លែងនេះបានសូមមកពីណាគឺយើង KNN distance ពី A មក cluster ទី1ដោយសារតែ A ខ្លួនឯងជា min cluster អញ្ចឹងប្រវែងវាមិននៅលើ point តែមួយមិននៅលើ point តែមួយ distance វាមិនសូន្យត្រូវ
បាន
ហើយកន្លែងនេះដូចគ្នាដែរពី A distance ពី A ទៅអីគេទៅ centroid របស់ class ទី2អញ្ចឹង distance A ពីទៅ centroid class ទី2យើងមិនមាននេះ x 185 y ស្មើ72ដល់អញ្ចឹងក្នុងពេលរូបរបស់យើង KNN distance ធ្វើម៉េចយកនេះដកគ្នាបូកជាមួយនឹងដកគ្នាលើកជាការ៉េទាំងអស់ហើយរើសជាការ៉េរូបមន្ត distance នោះនេះអូខេអញ្ចឹងនេះមិន distance របស់មិនជា coordinate របស់ A ហើយនេះមិនជា coordinate របស់ x ហើយយើង KNN ដល់20 ចុចជាងដល់ហើយអញ្ចឹងនៅពេលហ្នឹងយើងមិនបានយើងធ្វើចឹងតចឹងរហូតមកគឺ row distance រវាង point B ទៅ cluster ទៅ min cluster គឺ min cluster ឬក៏ centroid cluster ទី1និង cluster ទី2អញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំបានប្រវែងទាំងពីរឃើញ C ស្មើ0ណាដោយសារ C cluster ទី2វាជា min ខ្លួនឯងតោះវាជា centroid ផ្ទាល់ហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹង centroid ផ្ទាល់ទៅស្មើ0ទេដល់វាមាន distance ខ្លួនឯងណាហើយចឹងគេនេះចឹងមកបន្តទៅ compare តើពីរហ្នឹងមួយណាចិត្តជាងមានតែម៉េចមួយណាតូចជាងអញ្ចឹងឥឡូវ0តូចជាងគេវាមិនត្រូវ assign ទៅ cluster ទី1ទៅហើយដល់ពេល B អានេះតូចជាងគេវាត្រូវ assign B ទៅ cluster ទី2ទៅដោយសារតែតូចហ្នឹងមានថាវាចិត្តជាងវាចិត្តទៅមានថាប្រវែងពី B ទៅ centroid cluster 2ហើយនឹងទៅ centroid cluster ទី1ហ្នឹងគឺ B ហ្នឹងចិត្តជាងB ទៅ centroid cluster ទី2ហ្នឹងគឺចិត្តជាង B ទៅ centroid cluster ទី1អញ្ចឹងយើង assign B ឲ្យវាទៅជា class ទី2គឺយ៉ាងនេះអូនអញ្ចឹងយើងគ្រាន់តែចាំអត់ដាក់មកអូខេនៅពេលអញ្ចឹងតគ្នាយើងបានចំណោយយើង cluster ប៉ុណ្នេះហើយបន្តទៀតយើងទៅ update min របស់យើង update min យើងគឺ update នេះ update centroid ទី1គឺ base នេះទី2 base នេះហើយយើង loop ម្ដងទៀតមានថា KNN distance ម្ដងទៀត là hô tôi là những ba là result cluster nè bởi vì odd chain cái ta converge vì converge vì odd mean tới nào tiệt tệ trong kiện này mà đông là tập phần này còn nữa chứ nó bây giờ converge nhưng terminate iteration này nữa terminate loop vào những chụp loop này còn đấy
bạn của tôi chẳng
ok
là cũng dễ xưa
chẳng là bên nó cứ mình theo chủng loại về những cluster những mình theo BC cứ class type P data point A D E F cứ nó trong class type 1 ហើយហ្នឹងគឺដូចគ្នាដែរគេចង់ឲ្យធ្វើអញ្ចឹងអូខេ
បាទអញ្ចឹងធ្វើលំហាត់ហ្នឹងយើងធ្វើដោយដៃមិនមែនព្រោះមានសរសេរជា program
no អត់ program ព្រោះតែពេលប្រឡងយើងធ្វើដៃដែរតើតើនៅ case study ពេលយើង apply វានៅក្នុង air program ខ្ញុំនឹងប្រាប់យើងថាគេ apply មិនគឺយើងប្រើ package របស់គេអញ្ចឹងទៅយើង clean data យើងអីប៉ុន្តែពេលយើងរៀនហ្នឹងឯងខ្ញុំចង់និយាយថាមុខវិជ្ជាខ្ញុំគឺ basic apply គឺសម្រាប់ apply ទៅលើ algorithm អញ្ចឹងគេមានថាយើងរៀន calculate វាយល់ហើយយើងយក data set មក apply ថា apply វាមិនបងញ៉ាំហើយនេះគឺតែជា algorithm 2ដែលយើង start ដំបូងឯងតាមពិតគួរតែ start តាំងពីយូរហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងនៅមាន algorithm ច្រើនទៀតចឹងគ្នាយើងយល់ណាខ្ញុំសង្ឃឹមថាពួកយើងអាចធ្វើបានណាព្រោះថាខ្ញុំនិយាយជាក់ស្ដែងមុខវិជ្ជាខ្ញុំហ្នឹងខ្ញុំអត់មាន count អផ្សងអីទេគឺយើង focus តែយល់ហើយធ្វើបានអញ្ចឹងឲ្យតែយល់ហើយធ្វើបានគឺបន្ទុកពេញជាប់ខ្ញុំចង់និយាយអញ្ចឹងសម្រាប់ខ្ញុំគឺស្រួលណាឲ្យធ្វើបានគឺបន្ទុកពេញ
ខ្ញុំយកអត់x1 x2 ដែរតែតម្លៃវា
ក៏តម្លៃវាមានន័យថាយើង random select ពីណា select ពីdata point នៅក្នុងនេះតែយើងចង់សន្មត់ថាមួយណាជា centroid ឥឡូវខ្ញុំឧទាហរណ៍ថាឥឡូវបើសិនយើងថាខ្ញុំអត់យក A ខ្ញុំថា x on 0ហ្នឹងខ្ញុំអានេះគឺទៅដូចខ្ញុំថា x 0ចុះតែខ្ញុំសរសេរដាក់ថា x on bar 0ដោយសារខ្ញុំចង់បញ្ជាក់ថាវាជា min កុំបញ្ជាក់ថាវាជា starting point វាគឺជា min មានន័យថាវាជា centroid នៃ cluster ទី1 centroid នៃ cluster ទី2តោះណាចឹងនៅក្នុងចំណុចទាំង5ហ្នឹងតើយើងឆ្លាញ់មួយណាឬមួយហ្នឹងទៅប៉ុន្តែដូចបញ្ជាក់ចឹងឬអញ្ចឹងគឺធ្វើបាបយើងនៅពេលយើងគឺកណនីតែមិនស្រួលយើងអង្គុយកណនី3 4ដងទៅបំចប់តាមលំហាត់ហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងឆ្លាតយើងត្រូវទៅមើលនេះ data point របស់យើងមើលលើនេះទៅមកជាហៀងមកខាងនេះនិងមកហៀងមកខាងនេះអញ្ចឹងបើគិតទៅប្រហែលជានេះអាម្ដុំនេះបើមិនអាពីរហ្នឹងជា central ទេមួយណាមួយអញ្ចឹងឬគួរតែរើសយកតម្លៃណាមួយនៃពីរនេះព្រោះតែមើលទៅវាលំបាក់ហ្នឹង central ដោយសារជាតែខ្លះស្មើ2ហើយដូចគ្នាដែរពីរហ្នឹងយកមួយណាក៏បានដែរនេះត្រូវតែខ្លះនេះតម្លៃពីរនេះមួយណាមួយហើយពីរនេះមួយណាមួយជា central នៃ cluster តោះណាព្រោះថាយើងមើលទៅ data point គេឲ្យខ្លះមក2អញ្ចឹងណាខ្ញុំគិតថានេះខ្លះទី1ហើយខ្ញុំគិតថានេះខ្លះទី2ហើយអញ្ចឹងយើងត្រូវ initial centroid គឺតម្លៃកណ្ដាលនៃ data point ទាំងអស់នេះបងណាដូចខ្ញុំឲ្យយើងមើលណានេះខ្ញុំមាន data point ច្រើនហើយនេះគឺហៅថា centroid បងណាអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំបើខ្ញុំឆ្លាតគឺខ្ញុំរើសយកតម្លៃណាដែលនៅម្ដុំហ្នឹងចង់អីចឹងណាអញ្ចឹងពេលហ្នឹងធ្វើឲ្យខ្ញុំកណនី loop នេះអត់ច្រើនដងតិចអូខេតោះនេះគ្នាយើង
បាទតោះ
Okay. So for the other, do you guys have any question? Anyone have a question?
I think trong tiếng Nhật cũng ngồi thiền.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
លោកគ្រូខ្ញុំចង់សួរមួយទៀតបើសិនជាយើង select អា centroid នឹងខុសគ្នាទៅចម្លើយអាចខុសគ្នាដែរអត់
ទេ Believe me អត់តែយើងត្រូវកណនីត្រូវវា converge តែមួយឯងព្រោះថានេះ design និយាយថា converge ព្រោះថា code របស់យើងឬក៏ចង់និយាយថា method របស់យើងគឺយើងមានកន្លែងមួយទៅ update min ហូតតើ
បាទ
លុះត្រាតែយើង design ថា K យើងស្មើ3បានខុសតោះនិយាយ បើ case មកពីរដូចគ្នាខ្ញុំជឿមកថាអត់ខុសទេតោះណាខ្ញុំគិតថាអត់ខុសខ្ញុំចង់និយាយណាប៉ុន្តែដោយសារវា recognition ដែរខ្ញុំអត់បាន try recognition ដល់ទេប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំ believe មកដោយសារអីតែឥឡូវយើងសាកគិតមើលបើសិនជាយើងគិតថាយើងយក centroid ផ្សេងពីហ្នឹងយើងប្រកាសជា get នេះ result ទៅចេញខ្លះផ្សេងគ្នាដល់ខ្លះផ្សេងគ្នាយើង update min ទៅខុសគ្នារហូតវាតតែវាទៅ convert ខ្លះណាមួយដែលវាចេញចម្លើយអានេះខ្លះនេះនៅតែដូចគ្នាប៉ុណ្ណឹងដែរអញ្ចឹងពេលហ្នឹងបានយើង stop loop iteration របស់យើងអត់ okay
sir, where can we send the final thing?
Excuse me, can you repeat it?
How can I send you the file?
Oh, no need to send me. I think if you finish it, I want you to share to everyone and let's see together. Okay? Can you do that? Because this one I don't count for the score, just the practice one.
Okay, I'm not sure, but yeah, I can
yeah, it's okay. Just share to everyone. We will see. You can send to the group, the team chat here, and I will open it and see together. Okay, you can share your screen. It is fine.
Okay.
I will close my sharing screen. Okay.
So should I explain or something?
Yeah, you can explain and let everyone see.
Okay, so I just first of all I made a graphic of all the points. So then I started to try to separate the in a different cluster. So I choose this one, so this point, which is B, and the second point I choose 6, which is F. So I just choose randomly because according to the graphic. So then I started to calculate according to the mid of the cluster, which is B and F. Sorry. So I got this result, which is ABC for the first cluster, which means the 1, 2, and 3rd student, and then the second cluster I found at DEFG, sorry, so 4, 5, 6, and 7 is the second cluster. So in order to verify if it's good or not, I made the median of the like the I forgot to say it in English. The average of the X point between the ABC point and the DAFG for the second cluster. So I got this result.
Okay.
Based on that, I did the same process, but just with this point. So I can show you maybe the formula. So as you can see,
it's okay because you update the new centroid based on the first iteration, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah. So we update the new centroid and you calculate it again, and you have the final class the same as the first iteration. So which means that your algorithm will spend only two iteration, and you have a conversion of the cluster.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, it would be interesting. Yeah, it is interesting that you can use the Excel quickly. That spend less time. But actually, when we have exam, we don't use any software.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine because you understand. You can create Excel because yeah, it's fast. For everyone, I believe that you could understand the whole process. However, which tool or anything that you use for just practicing is fine, but just in the exam, it might be I ask you to do a handwriting, not the software. This is the normal process for this class. And actually, what he did is correct. And the process, as I have mentioned, so firstly, you randomly select. Can you scroll a little bit to the top? Yeah. You randomly select one central point of your data point. So
Yes.
when you use the graph to visualize your data here, we could see that since our algorithm define only k equal 2, so which means that the lower part, the lower of the data, and I mean from the 30, the y-axis from 30, and the 30 might be one cluster, and from over 30 might be one cluster, and then you just select which data point could possibly be the centroid, and then you proceed to the process. Can you scroll down a bit? You proceed the process, and you will spend only two iteration, which you can have the same cluster. Okay. Let me speak my bit. អញ្ចឹងឡើយហ្នឹងបងប្អូនគេឃើញហើយបើសិនជាយើងប្រើ visualize tool ពួកយើងអាចឃើញថា data នេះ data set នេះនៅលើ graph ហ្នឹងយើងដឹងថាវាគួរតែមាន2 point 2 cluster ហើយយើងគិតថាគួរតែរើស data point ណាជា central initial cluster កន្លែងរើសហ្នឹងត្រូវវាគ្រាន់តែចំណេញមួយទេចំណេញគេគឺចំណេញ computation consumption មានតែយើងអត់ត្រូវចំណាយពេលកណនីច្រើនហើយអ្វីដែលចុងក្រោយគឺពួកយើងនឹងឃើញ result ដូចរបស់គាត់អញ្ចឹងដំបូងគឺយើងរើសយក centroid សម្រាប់ cluster យើងកណនី distance យើង compare distance assign cluster ពេល assign cluster បានហើយយើង update centroid ដល់ពេល update centroid ហើយយើងកណនីម្ដងទៀតហើយយើង compare result cluster ហ្នឹងទៅនឹង previous iteration អញ្ចឹងបើសិន compare ទៅដូចគ្នាមានន័យថាcluster របស់យើងគឺ convergent ហើយបើ convergent មានន័យថាយើង stop iteration ប៉ុណ្ណឹង okay okay, thank you, Solar. So I would like to check anyone other. If you have finished it, you can show it to us, and let's see if it is correct or not. ចឹងគ្នាយើងអ្នកផ្សេងទៀតមានអ្នកធ្វើហើយយើងអាច share គ្នាបានទេ Hello គ្នាយើង
អត់ទាន់ហើយគ្រូធ្វើដៃអត់ទាន់ហើយ
Okay អត់ no problem អត់អីទេយើងនៅមានពេលទៀតចឹងយើងសាកធ្វើសិនទៅប៉ុន្តែមិញគឺជាចម្លើយធម្មតាណាគណៈមានន័យថាយើងរើសតែបើយើងរើសត្រូវគឺយើងចាយតែ two iteration ទេខ្ញុំសង្ឃឹមថាគ្នាយើងបានធ្វើទាំងអស់គ្នាទោះបីជាធ្វើអត់ចប់ឬក៏យ៉ាងណាក៏ដោយសំខាន់គឺយើងបានធ្វើហើយយើងដឹងថាយើងអត់យល់ត្រង់ណាច្បាស់យើងអាចសួរថែមព្រោះតែកន្លែងនេះវាជាអត់ពិបាកទេវា simple ទេប៉ុន្តែបើអត់ធ្វើយើងហើយជាអាចនឹងអត់យល់ចង់អញ្ចឹងឥឡូវខ្ញុំសាក check គ្នាយើងមួយមើលចង់នឹងថាគ្នាមានណាប្រហែលឲ្យធ្វើmaster ខ្ញុំចង់ master ធ្វើអត់ទេ rolling hello rolling គេញឹកទៅដឹងបានធ្វើនឹងគេអត់
ខ្ញុំនៅក៏អត់បានទេតែឡើយមួយក៏ខ្ញុំយកបានខ្ញុំខ្ញុំសិនខ្ញុំទៅតាមគេ
ដឹងអូខេខ្ញុំសង្ឃឹមថាយើងបានធ្វើហើយបើសិនជាគ្នាយើងអត់យកត្រូវសួរ nhưng cho một trận đầu tiên chẳng hay Khang. I'm sorry, I say Anthony. Is that the name? Anthony or Sailor? Yes, Anthony, right? Your name?
Antoine. But yeah, you can call me Anthony if you, but normally it's Antoine. But that's okay. Anthony is okay. Anthony is okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Antoine, right? Okay. ដូច Antoine ក៏ធ្វើអញ្ចឹងមានន័យថាអ្វីខ្ញុំចង់បញ្ជាក់គឺចង់ថាយើងប្រើសំខាន់យើងប្រើ to a ក្នុងពេលហ្នឹងគឺអត់បញ្ហាទេប៉ុន្តែគ្នាយើងគួរតែយល់ process ទាំងមូលតនេះinitial ពេលណា start ពេល initial ហើយយើងវា get the distance វាអត់ពិបាកទេដូចជា step by step ទេតោះណាដំបូងគឺយើងរើស point ណាមួយឥឡូវសន្មតថាយើងមិនបាច់ខ្វល់រឿងថារើសឲ្យត្រូវ k ឯងយើងចាប់ point ណាមួយអាហ្នឹងគឺសន្មតថាវាជា central point តោះណា central point នៃ cluster ពេលតែ cluster ក្នុងមួយ cluster វាមាន data point ច្រើនតោះណា at least one និយាយចេះវិញមួយ cluster គឺមាន data point ច្រើនវាអញ្ចឹងនៅក្នុងនៅពេលដែលយើង start ដំបូងគឺយើង initial cluster នឹងមួយអញ្ចឹង x on របស់ខ្ញុំហ្នឹងគឺយើង select មួយណាក៏បានប៉ុន្តែដោយសារតែយើងមើលតាម graph យើងឃើញយើងរើសណាដែលត្រូវដែលស្រួលចង់អញ្ចឹងណាបន្តមកទៀតនៅពេលបាន point របស់ central យើងគាត់តែ get the distance ណាវាថា get the distance នៅលើ two dimensional space មានន័យ abscissa ចុងដក abscissa គុណដូចជាការ៉េបូក ordinate ចុង ordinate គុណដូចជាការ៉េហើយពាក់រើសវាមកចឹងប្រវែងហ្នឹងដល់ហើយcòn làមានអីទៀតទៅពេលឃើញប្រវែងពី distance មួយទៅ cluster មួយពី distance point មួយទៅ cluster មួយ compare វាណាតូចជាង assign វាចូល cluster មួយនោះតោះណាបន្តមកទៀតយើង assign អញ្ចឹងហើយគ្រាន់តែយើង update យើង initial ដំបូងហ្នឹងដំបូង initial x ស្មើ a អញ្ចឹងទៅប៉ុន្តែលើកហ្នឹងលែងយើងទៅ update វាយោងទៅតាម cluster ដែលយើងមានជា cluster ទី1ដូចខ្ញុំមានអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំនិយាយទៅមកទេដូចមាន a d e f ហ្នឹងគឺគណនាតែ update ទៅ cluster update ទៅ central យោងទៅតាម data point នៅក្នុង cluster របស់យើងហ្នឹងបងណាហើយចឹងពេលទៅអញ្ចឹងទៅយើងធ្វើម្ដងទៀតគឺគ្រាន់តែ get distance ម្ដងទៀតទៅ compare ម្ដងទៀតហើយយើងយក result iteration ទី1និង iteration ទី2 compare គ្នាថាតើ cluster ទី1និង cluster ទី1នៃ iteration 2នោះដូចគ្នាអត់បើដូចគ្នាទាំងអស់ហើយគឺយើង stop process ហ្នឹង stop terminate មាន terminate ទៅលើ iteration ហ្នឹងទៀតបងអូខេមុនហ្នឹងដូចជាអ្នកណាធ្វើចិត្តហើយគឹមហេងមែនគឹមហេង
បាទលោកគ្រូខ្ញុំធ្វើដែរតែអត់ធ្វើអត់តាន់ហើយ
ណាប៉ុន្តែធ្វើបានហើយ
ធ្វើបានលោកគ្រូយល់ពីរបៀបធ្វើវាតែ
អូខេខ្ញុំសុំសួរអ្នកផ្សេងទៀតអាងមិញឈួនបានធ្វើអី
ខ្ញុំកំពុងធ្វើលោកគ្រូប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំអត់ទាន់សូវយល់ពេលយើង compare ធ្វើមិនបានឆ្លងទៅ iteration មួយទៀត loop រហូតដល់ឈប់ធ្វើលោកគ្រូខ្ញុំអត់ទាន់សូវយល់ឡើងកន្លែងទៅហ្នឹង
អូខេឥឡូវខ្ញុំ share ម្ដងទៀតអូខេកន្លែងនេះអញ្ចឹងតើយើងឃើញចេះតែនេះឥឡូវយើងបាច់និយាយធំនេះយើងនិយាយធំនេះ data point នេះខ្ញុំ copy មកខាងនេះហើយអញ្ចឹងដំបូងយើងមិន initial អញ្ចឹងហើយយើងកណនាទៅអត់ initial c and a ជា central point ទេយើងកណនា distance គ្រប់ point ទាំងអស់ទៅ central បានប្រវែងយើងមកសាយអូខេបន្តទៅយើងបាន cluster ប៉ុណ្នេះតានេះតាមពិតអានេះខ្ញុំសរសេរវាចុះនេះតែតាមពិតគឺយើងបាន cluster ប៉ុណ្ណេះមុនបាន cluster ហើយបានយើងកណនា update central ទៅអញ្ចឹង update នេះតើអត់អូខេខ្ញុំ update នេះខ្ញុំ update ទៅតាម cluster នេះទៅតើ
បាទ
អញ្ចឹងដល់ពេល iteration ទី2ដោយសារតែខ្ញុំ cluster ខ្ញុំទៅមានប៉ុណ្ណេះហ្នឹងខ្ញុំអត់ទាន់ដឹងថាពីមុន cluster ប៉ុន្មានហ្នឹងទៅអញ្ចឹងមាន compare ប៉ុន្តែដល់ពេល iteration ទី2ខ្ញុំកណនាហើយខ្ញុំបាន cluster ប៉ុណ្ណេះដែរតែអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំយកអាមួយហ្នឹងទៅ compare មកមួយនេះហើយ
so
ហើយ
wait ខ្ញុំ still អត់ទាន់
មិនក៏អត់យល់អានេះ iteration ថ្មីដែរនិយាយថាកណនា distance ម្ដងទៀតទៅ central ថ្មីនេះ central ថ្មីដែរ
កណនា distance ហ្នឹងមានន័យថាយកដែលយើងបានរកមុនហ្នឹងយក central វិញមែនលោកគ្រូ
ហ្នឹងហើយមានន័យថានេះយើង update នេះមិន x0 x10 អានេះ x11 នេះវាឡើង iteration ទី1ទី2ដែរ
យល់អញ្ចឹងយកពីdistance centroid A ដបងនេះ dương kẹn nếp giả distance chắc mau này mau
no không hay mình kẹn này distance này cứ dương vô data point ế data point này data point nào họ đấu ấy nè
bạn
mình thấy dương kẹn này từ nè từ cho môi nâng centroid ti môi thằng đó để centroid ti môi thằng những sao phần này
nâng bạn
no giờ này nè centroid ti môi thằng xong tôi tạm bắt những sự a đấy không nè tạm bắt mình thay cứ centroid nè trong này chẳng á còn tại vì mình chỉ a hay còn mình chỉ c này trong này chẳng á rồi cho mình thay những sự notation không phải nhìn tị rồi đấy notation lại nít cứ mình a cho thay lại nít cứ centroid thằng lại nhẹ toàn vậy chứ cứ nhé chứ mình thay vô để tập khoản é kẹn gì mọi mình mọi é cứ kẹn gì mọi new centroid để update đó
bạn
chứ mình riêng khơi tầm lại với mua cho chuyện phần tài muốn đi khơi sâu nữa nhé được hai đứa khơi xấu để sao việc con việc chỉ centroid ấy vì mình distance mình sâu
bạn ăn nắng
ok chứ nó p năng những bạn chứ như compare thì đấy compare tiếp đi là sai về anh ấy tôi chính anh ấy mỗi tôi chuyện này chứ mình thay vì cô tên là cluster thì mỗi anh ấy tôi chiên này chứ với cô tên là cluster thì bị đó ok nhưng không muốn cứ nhưng mới thay nhưng đạo này là sổ ấy ta mất mình a này trời thằng ấy cứ chia new centroid update ok chẳng phải nó dương mình ban cluster thôi như vậy hay cluster thôi nó ngờ nó hay dương giờ nó một compare ngoài trả hồi dương nó đôi khi chẳng meta dương stop iteration phần nào
ok cho lực cho ở con tràn lực
ok alright nhưng vậy bao gồm đó hay khi dân của bạn là xui chứ là rối chưa là rối
nhôm ở sau cái tay nhôm trong trăm video là cô mà đo tiền thể hiện cho bạn
ok Elan mình nói Elan là đây xây há xong bật
anh có anh thôi distance dương thôi thì chúng tôi tập đông con những cho ba mẹ
to distance mình
rồi x0 x1 x5 នេះ x11 ចឹងចឹងមានធ្វើត្រឹមពីរដងប៉ុណ្ណឹងហើយរក distance វា final ទៅតាម
អត់ទេវាយោងទៅតាមនេះយោងទៅតាមចម្លើយនេះឥឡូវគ្រូពេលដែលគ្រូយកអា distance វាគេថាយក central វាស្មើ a ស្មើ c នេះមើល a c នេះ a តម្លៃនេះគឺគ្រូបានមានថាគ្រូ cluster data point ចូល2 cluster k អញ្ចឹងវាឲ្យស្មើ2ទៅអញ្ចឹងវាមាន2 cluster ហើយគ្រូប្រាប់ថាមានថាខ្ញុំប្រាប់ថាកន្លែង cluster ទី1នេះគឺជា data point នៅក្នុង class ទី1នេះគឺជា data point នៅក្នុង class ទី2អូខេហើយអញ្ចឹងមានថានៅពេលខ្ញុំបាន data point នៅក្នុង cluster មួយហើយបន្ទាប់ពី first iteration របស់ខ្ញុំគឺខ្ញុំមក update អា x on នេះ update អា x on នេះតែនេះដល់ពេល first 0 iteration មានថាវា initial iteration ខ្ញុំយកស្មើអញ្ចឹងប៉ុន្តែដល់ពេល update វាយោងទៅតាម cluster របស់ខ្ញុំគឺខ្ញុំបានតម្លៃប៉ុណ្នេះតោះនេះហើយយើងគ្នាសួរថាមិនក៏យើងធ្វើតែ2ដងមិនមែន2ដងដោយសារទេគឺដោយសារតែចម្លើយអា iteration ទី2នេះវាដូចនឹងចម្លើយ iteration ទី1មានន័យថា cluster របស់យើងវា converge នៅជាមួយគ្នាហើយអត់ដូរទៅណាអូនបើសិនជានេះ A D C F ខុសគ្នាត្រូវតែលូកម្ដងទៀតតោះណា
លោកតារកចម្លើយដូចគ្នា
តោះតែវា conversion តោះអូខេ
លោកគ្រូម្ដងទៀតបើសិនជា loop លើកទី3យើង compare ជាមួយអា iteration ទី2ឬក៏ iteration ទី1ដែរ
យក last iteration យក n ដក1អញ្ចឹងយើង compare តំណាងក្រោយទៅអ
ញ្ចឹងយក n ដក1compare ជាមួយអាបន្ទាប់ដែលនេះនឹងអាចាស់ដែលយើងរកបាន
yes
បាទអញ្ចឹង
ព្រោះតែដោយសារអីបានយើង compare ហ្នឹងដោយសារតែអាចុងក្រោយហ្នឹងវាជា last update central ទៅអត់បើយើងទៅ compare អាចាស់មកវិញអញ្ចឹងមានថាវាទៅ update central យើងរហូតអត់អញ្ចឹងយើងយកតែ last update បន្ទាប់ពីហ្នឹងអូខេអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំគិតថាខ្ញុំសូម end ប៉ុណ្ណឹង so I think I would end the class by now because I believe everyone would understand it just try to practice on how to do it and anyone having more question please no one having question If there's no more question, we can end our class by now. So thank you for coming today. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, teacher.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
Goodbye,
Thank you.
teacher.
Chúc mừng cô.
Okay.